Hi, this is Cindy at the Santa Maria Valley Historical Society. I'm the curator here. I'm also the executive director, the janitor, and I'm in charge of the headstones. And as we take a look at the history of the cemetery in Santa Maria, we wouldn't be doing it a real service if we didn't talk about some of the art that's out in the cemetery, which includes the headstones. One of the first headstone makers was Charles Turek, and this is an example of some of his work. He did a lot of ornate stuff on this particular, I don't know, it's not a headstone, it's a kind of just an advertisement, if you will. He's a marble dealer, and he wanted to show you some idea of what kind of work he could do. And if you've ever spent much time in a cemetery, you'll know that there are a variety of headstones and things out there. They're all very heavy, and they're all very big, and there's a variety of things out there to look at and to see. And there's actually secrets in headstones, whether they're Mason signs or other religious emblems out there. And we'll take a look at that as we visit the cemetery. In addition to some very artistic work that are done on the headstones out of the cemetery, we often find photographs of people embedded in their headstones, especially a lot of times if there are children. They tend to want to put their pictures there, of course, because they're considered angels or angelic or little lambs. And so we find that on the headstones as well. Sometimes older people will put together their wedding photos, or they'll even put a picture of themselves from when they were very young. In some instances, you find photographs of people who have already passed. We have an example up here of a gentleman whose only picture that was ever made of him was after he died. You can tell that his eyes are closed. But because photographs were rare and few, a photograph was a very important history of an individual person. And if no picture had been taken of him before, I guess they didn't want to miss their opportunity to have a photograph of him. And you could see he was a pretty young fellow, so they wanted to remember him. So let's head out to the cemetery and highlight some of the different headstones and some of the other markers and things you find around the cemetery close to the headstones. So one of my favorite things to see at the cemetery is just kind of the different stylized looks for the different headstones. And this one you can see the dove and the open gates of heaven. So they had really great expectations for Hugh here, Hugh Kelly, because they were visualizing him entering the gates of heaven on his headstone. Right next to him is probably his parents. I have to look at the dates, but it's very much the two together. Their names side to side. A lot of times you'll see forever written on them, indicating that the two people tend to expect to be bonded for a really long time. Lilies are pretty common, and flowers, the idea of growth and spring and things new. So that, for some reason, we really enjoy the idea that returning to life, the idea of things returning to life, like flowers coming back each year. And of course, then they topped it all off with this great, big, nice, beautiful headstone, which is very elaborate and has a lot of things going on. This is a flower up here, and this is raised, and it's got a lot going on here. And so you can see that this family put a lot of belief probably into the afterlife and everything, and they really marked it so that they would be remembered. So as we're walking through, we just kind of happened upon Mr. Wiley here, and Wiley was one of the very first people in the community. He kind of kicked the whole thing off. He found the valley. He was a big promoter of the valley, and he came here as a widower and stayed that way for a lot of years until he eventually married Abigail Trott, who'd also become a widow. So, but this headstone's kind of interesting in that he's kind of depicted heaven. It says call on higher, and so he's kind of given us a view of what he thinks the heaven is going to look like. It's obviously going to be really, really ornate and steepled. So one of the really interesting things that you can spot from just about standing anywhere in the cemetery is a little lamb.
Obviously, anybody who's had children knows that all children are not little lambs, but the lamb is pretty indicative of when a child has died early in life, and it's one of the ways they're commemorated. Even if a child is stillborn or goes early and may not even receive a name, there's almost always a little lamb to mark their grave and to remind everybody about their innocence, and of course that the child was loved and wanted. But this becomes their resting place. And as you scan out across the cemetery, it's amazing how many lambs, unfortunately, are in a cemetery. So we talked a little bit about a monument versus a headstone. Well, now we've gone really big. Now this is for the Adam family, which are also still, many of those folks are still here locally. And what they've done is they've set up this big monument, and then the family owned quite a bit of the area here. And around me, you will see all the different headstones of all the different Adam family members who are buried in this location. So in some ways, this was a calling card to let people know that if you were interested in the Adam family, this was their place in the cemetery. And then you could find your individual Adam by walking the perimeter of the area that was laid out for them. Okay, so we were talking about headstones, monuments, and different things, and how each one was could be expressive and could kind of be someone's last statement. Well, this one's kind of an interesting one because it looks like a tree stump. So with a little closer inspection, you can see it says Woodman of the World on it, which you think, oh my gosh, this guy must have been a great forester guy or something. But in actuality, the Woodmen of the World were life insurance salesmen. And so it's kind of fascinating that he must have been really proud to be a part of that group or that club, because he decided in the end to really put some flair to his headstone and say goodbye to this world with a pretty unique outlook. So I always think these look like bedrolls. They bought their bedroll out to the cemetery, and here they are. So a headstone or a monument or an engraving can be anything from a bench to rolled marble to an urn style. There's just an unlimited way that people often express themselves in remembering their loved ones. So one of the really amazing features about headstones and monuments as things is it's kind of the last chance for the individual to make a statement, if you will. In this particular case, John Winters has added to his monument the Mason symbol as a way of indicating some of his beliefs. Everything on a headstone is pretty much the last word of the person or the family that goes along with it. And so you can learn a lot what they were kind of proud of or what their interest levels were. And so it can be quite fascinating to learn more about an individual just from the features that they have on their headstones. So this monument kind of has everything all rolled together that we saw in some of the others, from the blanket drape to the Bible image to the Mason sign, the open gates, the opening of the pearly gates, receiving the person. So it really tells a lot about the individual in all of the different ways that they've elaborated their story here. One of my very favorite things to find in the cemetery are pictures. A lot of times the only pictures of a family member might actually be encased on a headstone, and these will be pictures that were made at the time that the person passed, or they were favorite photos of the family before the person passed. I always said, if I have my picture on my headstone, I don't want it to be when I'm 94, make it 22. In this particular case, you can see this gentleman and this lady, a very handsome couple. So this headstone is really fascinating. It's almost got a family tree on it. You have a couple up here, and you can see both of them. Once again, you have a difference in timeline. There's a couple here, and they have their faces here with theirs. This particular couple here, only one member has arrived. The other one isn't here yet. And so when you're taking a stroll through the cemetery, there's a lot to learn. That some people feel joined together forever, and some people don't want to be considered together forever, obviously. So headstones are a fascinating place to learn. I hope you'll take the time when you're visiting and to learn not just about the headstones and the names and the families and the birth and death dates and the family trees and what timelines and things that might have happened around them. But we hope you'll enjoy your walk out here. I'm Cindy Ranzik. I'm at the Historical Society. We're happy to answer questions and to help you take a walk and to learn more about your family and to learn more about our city through the history of our cemetery.